Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Comet Sprint 22 review. This is the second of 4 sprints for the spring work cycle. As a reminder, the overarching theme for this work cycle is a focus on Comet, Ruby on Rails, maintenance upgrades, a LARC, but Tamsin will go into more detail about the work that was actually done for Sprint 22. Feel free to post any questions that you might have while Tamsin is providing the demo, or you can wait until afterwards to ask your questions. Tamsin.
Amazing. I'm gonna screen share. You all can see my screen? Amazing. Okay, so this was sprint 2 of 4 in this work cycle. Just to remind about the overall work cycle plan, the way that we structured the 4 sprints was that we planned to do Comet work throughout in all 4 sprints. And in the first 2 sprints, we planned to do maintenance work. So this means many of the Surfliner products were becoming sort of behind on some key dependencies, like the Ruby language and the Rails framework, and some other sort of critical major dependencies that we have for these projects. And we wanted to catch up on that early in basically in the first work cycle of this year. It seemed like a big priority. That our feeling is that the more proactive we are about this kind of maintenance, the less work it takes overall. So we had sort of identified that this was a high priority. So we plan to do that for the first 2 sprints, and in the next 2 sprints, we'll transition the effort that had been going in that direction over to the LARC project, and I'll say just a little bit more about that right at the end. But suffice to say that the maintenance work that we planned is almost all done. So all the projects other than Comet, we got up to date. The Comet getting up to date, we always knew was going to be a little bit more complicated. And it's not quite done yet, in part because because we own more of the large dependencies, or we collaborate on more of the large dependencies in Comet. So getting them ready for us to make that upgrade is a little bit more work intensive, and we're continuing to do that. I expect that won't get closed today, which is the end of the sprint, and our plan for keeping that Comet work moving forward is to just sort of wrap it into the Comet work that we have planned for the next couple of sprints, and we feel that's pretty appropriate. So that's the maintenance portion of this sprint. We're super happy to have all of the other products up to date. I think we really, especially if we can finish the Comet upgrade work in the next 2 sprints, we'll have really met our broad Surfliner maintenance goals that we set for this year. Cool. So I want to demo some Comet stuff, and I'll start with some small pieces. Well, I don't want to diminish them, but one of the things that was called out as a need for this for the UI was that you could see at a glance whether an object is visible in some kind of front end or not. So we did some initial wireframing on this last sprint and wrote some tickets related to this need for publication status labels. And you can see that now in this broad object view, only in your objects, not all objects. Maybe we need to flag that, Gabriella. That you can see a unpublished tag for each of these. And you can see that there are some of these that are published. I'm going to go ahead and go through the publication process for this object. This probably should go to Tidewater at some point. So the way that we're publishing objects to Tidewater now, I think we'll change some of these labels again. But the way that we're publishing objects to the OAI endpoint now is to do that by collection. So we can do that here. And if we go back and refresh this, we should see that this object, this probably should go to Tidewater at some point. It is now marked published. On this sort of top level page, our plan is to keep this badge at this level of granularity. Just, is this visible in some discovery system or is it not? And the terminology that we're using for that is published or unpublished. We have some tickets open to introduce these badges to a number of other places, including the show page here. And the wireframes that we have in mind for that involve showing more closely where exactly these things are published to. That's also something that we're planning to add to the collection page and to the edit collection page, somewhere in here. There's a wireframe for this and tickets open for this. And also, last but not least, in the object, let's go ahead. Oh yeah, you can see that this also got introduced to, you can see that this also got introduced to the collection listing here. And again, last but not least, we are going to put these badges over in this space underneath the visibility in the edit page, so that if you're editing an object, you can also see where it's visible, which discovery platforms it's been published to. Great. So there's work that we're planning to do continuously on that. We also did some work this sprint that I'm not going to try to demo for us, but that will, I think, get merged today. And that includes some label changes. So there are some places about where you can still see terminology like works. This like pub status is not the terminology that we want to appear here. This visibility of work we feel is a little bit cumbersome, so we're just going to drop it to visibility. And there's kind of a laundry list of these kinds of label changes that Gabriella put together for us that we did in sort of one big batch, that are not merged and deployed this second, but will be by the end of day, I'm sure. So I just want to name that as work that got done. Okay, so this brings us to the big work chunk for the sprint, which is the bulk racks work. And I'm going to demo a couple of things about bulk import that have changed since we last talked. Let's start with an import. I'm going to name them with alphabetically convenient names so that they show up right at the top. So an import with files. That's exciting. We'll put this in default project and we'll grab a CSV. And the CSV is titled S3 objects. That's lovely. I'm wondering, yes, it looks like you can see this. So let's do Surfliner Comet. Okay, so this is the example CSV that I'm going to use. If it loads up for us. And I don't want, I'm sure that it's a little bit small and hard to read, but I'm not going to fuss too much about making sure that we can spend time with this CSV. But I do want to call out that we have some file paths in here that that we should be ingesting. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this CSV. Make this full screen. Yeah, there we go. I like to do create and validate because that makes me feel, oh, did this just get deployed? Did our label changes just come through? They might have. Yeah, there you go. There's some label changes for you. Magic
That's
at
cool.
work.
That's cool.
Okay, sorry. We're going to start this importer again and import with files. We select a project. There's a merge request that's open to hide the bulk recs import formats that we're not yet supporting, so that we don't have to like go through this process and know that the OAI and XML and Baggett formats are not supported yet. But that's also, I think, just going to get merged later today. Create and validate. So we got 3 objects here. And as usual, we can see what they look like, what the fields look like in them. And you can see the parsed fields. And the files that we're ingesting here are these remote files. We're doing some work around these other files, I think, in the next sprint. There's a need for a number of different CSV file reference formats, but what we focused on this time was just getting some files in and attached. So we're pushing these through from an S3 bucket. So this works quite a bit like our old ingest system that we turned off, which is to say that these files need to be uploaded somewhere in advance of the ingest. But where that is something that the individual campuses have a lot of control over. And I think when we ingest, when we run this, let's go continue, then we should see, yeah, okay. So import with files. We did get these 3 objects through. I expect them to have linked, but it doesn't look like they linked. In any case, they did actually get ingested. Oh, but the files didn't attach.
The
I
only
thought
one,
that
the only one that has
sorry.
a file is lakes.
Oh, lakes, great, thank you. Thanks for jumping in, Alex. Lakes. So that's the file that we ingested. It's gone up into the IIIF server because this one's an image, and we got a viewer. You can go see it. Cool. You can download it. It didn't get a thumbnail because we're still not fussing with that too much. But there you go. Again, we have some more work to do on supporting realistic, complex file attachment use cases. But this was a really important step because it means that we can actually do the mechanical, the sort of technical process of finding the file, getting it in the right place, and ingesting it at scale. Cool. I want to name something else about this ingest, which is that sorry, my dog's trying to dig at his bed right next to me. I don't know if you could hear that, but it was very distracting to me. Okay, so the other thing that I want to name about this ingest is that some of these files were marked as public in the CSV, and some of them were marked as restricted. And we can see, in fact, that they have applied those visibilities. So soils is private, but rivers and lakes are public. And that's something that you can control just with a column in the CSV that's named visibility. Alex, if I leave that column out, everything goes to restricted by default. Is that right?
That should be the default behavior, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a new feature that we talked about demoing last week that is working now. And a third thing that I want to show just from this original ingest is that these objects went through to the workflow that the project is attached to. So this was something that wasn't happening before with these batch ingests, but is now. If you do a batch ingest, those batch objects go directly into the workflow. If I choose a different project at ingest time, then they'll go into a different workflow depending on the one that's attached to the project. Okay, the last thing that I want to show about the ingest process, well, I guess I have two more things actually. Let me do them one by one. And we had some discussion last week about without source IDs, about the need to specify a custom source ID for like a one that's globally unique for each object in the CSV. So you can, if we go back to the CSV, you can see there's a source identifier field. You can see that there's a source identifier field and that each of these has a source ID that's reasonably globally unique for the UCSB context. And it's been sort of named that it's a lot to ask that people be able to make up these globally unique IDs in cases where they don't need to do sort of like internal reference for these IDs. So let's just drop a couple of them and go ahead and do this again. Okay, so this is the behavior that I'm expecting. You'll see that we have 3 objects, but we're only seeing 2 of them here. And that's something that we're planning to fix here. I think the problem is just that when we assign the source IDs, when we assign the sort of magic source ID to to fill in this space that it gets sort of done wrong. But what's going to happen, I think, is that when we ingest these, we will actually get all 3 objects. Yeah, we got another a full copy of these 3. And actually, let's I think it's helpful maybe to soils. Let's just name each of them something different for our benefit as well. And then lakes. So if I do this again, I think we should see pretty clearly that we got all 3 objects. And there's just a bug that we're trying to clear up today about how they display in the actual ingester. And Longshu and I have been talking about how to fix this bug already. So if I ingest this, I see total works. I just don't see them listed in this table. And when they ingest, I do get new 1, 2, 3. So what this means is that in the future, if you don't have some kind of existing globally unique identifier for these objects, you don't have to actually make one up and worry about sort of like crossing streams with other ingests about those references. And I have one last thing that I want to show here, which is that I do have another ingest that sort of more clearly uses this source ID feature. And I'm expecting this demo to be sort of partial, but there's a few things about it that I want to call attention to for everybody's benefit, even though this isn't a feature that I think we're quite ready with yet. So I've added to this field, or to this CSV, a final column called parent ID. And I've added to the very bottom of it a new object. That's sorry about that. A new object that's a collection. So you see its model is named collection. It has a source ID that's test collection 1. And then for a couple of these objects, I've added to that parent ID column at the end that they should be members of test collection 1. So this shows you, I think, the part of the utility of this source identifier feature, which is that though I don't yet have this collection ingested, I do have a way that I can reference it within this CSV so that I can add both the collection and all of its members together in one ingest. Okay, so I'm actually going to go quickly through the process of ingesting this one, and we'll name it. We'll name it an import with collection. And I named this file with collection. And if I create and validate, then I should see all 3 of these objects exist. The collection is in the ingest. What I'm expecting to find is that the actual collection ingest doesn't go off correctly because of because of a bug that we've introduced on our side, but that I expect will be quick to clear up. But this, I'm showing you this in part just to show how we expect this collection addition to work going forward. So yeah, you can see we got an error on this object, or sorry, on this collection. The objects ingested but they won't be members of the collection because it doesn't exist yet. And that's all what I expected to see there. A nice thing about that I can show quickly here also is that if I rerun, yeah, let's just rerun this from the existing. Let's upload this again. Did I see? Yeah, I did save that. Great. So I just removed the the title from that collection, and I think we can see. I think we should see that it fails. Well, maybe I should do this with a new import. That's how I prepped this. And import with collection missing title. Boop, 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 boop. So when I click create and validate this time, I think I should see that, yeah, missing required elements, missing elements are title. So this is an example of this object failed the validation step. And if we had validations in place for the objects, you would see behavior like this when you click that create and validate button before we've tried to create the objects themselves. So that's an example of the validation behavior. The last thing that we worked on pretty heavily this sprint is this exporter behavior. And there's still, I think, a fair bit of work that we're trying to close out about this today. But I do want to name that we did get pretty far with this export stuff. Part of the reason why it's not quite done yet is that the upstream bulk racks engine is moving pretty rapidly. Part of the reason it's been moving rapidly is we've been involved in its development, but it's also just sort of moving without us. And sometimes, and that's leading to us needing to sort of remediate issues. And particularly early this week, that's been an issue. There's some stuff that we would like to be pulling in from the upstream dependency, but that we can't because a bug has been introduced up there in an unreleased version, and we're tracking the unreleased version, so we don't want to update to the version with the bug, and we're having to sort of do that work in a more touch and go kind of way than we would be if we were using released versions of this gem. I expect that by the end of the work cycle, we'll sort of settle everything down and get on a released version and not be moving quite so rapidly with it. But it is slowing us down, particularly with this export a little bit now. Okay. Did we get any questions we want to address before we talk about what we're doing next sprint?
I don't have any questions that have come in via the chat. But I think if folks have questions, we could pause and you'd be welcome to unmute yourself. or just type them into the chat.
I don't have a question, but I have something to confirm with you, Tamsin, and that I see with your CSV that you are using pipe delimiters, and they obviously are not working, but we do have a ticket to address that. I believe it's
Yeah,
subject topic.
I think that's right. I think that we're expecting this pipe delimited field to create multiple values, and that it's a known bug that has an open ticket that we're planning to put into the next sprint to fix that, so that the multi-value behavior works the way we expect.
And then I also have a question about source ID. You were taking some of those IDs out. I wasn't sure if you took all of them from your CSV. Can you tell me if I have a CSV and I add some source IDs to some columns and not, or to some rows and not to others, will it choke on that, or will it accept a spreadsheet that has a combination of no source IDs and some source IDs?
Yeah, so it will accept a spreadsheet with a combination. And yeah, that's what we see here. So this one did have a source ID that we provided. These other two that are getting lumped together in this table, but not in the actual ingest, are not. What's going on here is that there are actually two rows in the column that are getting assigned the same source ID at ingest time, which is just a bug. But then certain parts of the display are deduping on the source ID rather than anything else that might be unique about this this row. So we only see the one copy of each source ID. But the behavior is actually correct. We see there's 3 total works. But yeah, Gabriella, to answer your question, the reason we see 2 objects here is that we've got one that we provided the source ID for, and then we've got one that represents 2 objects that got assigned the same source ID. Sorry if that's confusing, but I do expect this to be ironed out today. I see Dave's hand.
Awesome.
Yeah, also about source IDs. Is the user responsible for making sure all their source IDs are globally unique, or is there any kind of testing going on within the software?
It's totally the user's responsibility, yeah, which is one reason why we felt it was important to support this no source ID option. But the purported benefit of these source IDs is really that if I would like to ingest the same spreadsheet over and over again using, say, different importers or whatever process actually works for my workflow, that I can ensure that they're always going to overwrite the object. There's no way for the system to know if you provided a source ID that matches one that already exists, that you didn't mean to overwrite that object. So it can't tell whether you're doing that right or not. So it is important when the source ID is provided that the campuses have a set of practices around providing them that can administratively guarantee that uniqueness. But one way to avoid that burden is to just allow you to ingest without them in the cases where they're not strictly needed. So if you're not doing that sort of, I've got a spreadsheet and I'm going to maintain it and I'm going to upload it periodically to keep the system up to date with the spreadsheet type of workflow. And if you're not doing complex relationships within the spreadsheet, then you don't need a source ID. That's the feature that we're trying to make sure works well for you here.
Okay, great. I had another question, but you just answered it. So,
okay.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions for Tamsin or Gabriella? I'm going to let us go into a little bit awkward silence for a second. Okay, I did my count to 11 and I did not hear any. So I still encourage you, if something pops into your head, please add it into the chat. But I think, Tamsin, if you want to move on to the next topic, that would be awesome.
Great. So I'll just do very quickly that, again, next sprint, we plan to work both on Comet, continuing that work, and on the Lark Authority Control Platform. And our goal for the Lark sprints is really sort of twofold. One is to finish the Lark MVP that was scoped some time ago. And then the second goal is to get you some kind of demoable integration with Comet. What that will likely be is being able to say in the metadata configuration that a particular field, say like the rights statement, as an example, needs to come from a vocabulary, needs to have values from a vocabulary that's stored in the Lark system, and to be able to show you a validation for one of these bulk imports where if I create an import from a spreadsheet that has values that don't match that I can see that in the validation status before I try to ingest the object. So that's the integration that we're hoping to achieve over the next couple of weeks. It might be a little bit of a stretch goal to get to that demo, but we're going to push in that direction. That's part of the goal here. The other things that we're actively working on are, again, we'd really like to show you Comet export with files bundled and a round trip where you ingest an object, CSV, export it again, and can make changes and re-import. So we'll hope to demo some more about this bulk integration behavior over the next couple of sprints. And then additionally, we're working on various parts of the workflow and project related behavior. So that's like details about how these projects actually behave with respect to who can do what within them and who has various workflow roles. But also we have scoped out some work at some length, scoped out some work to change the structure of these visibility options to be something that is more robust and useful to both campuses. We have some alignment on what the visibility options should be, and we've put tickets to change the visibility structure into the next sprint as well. So that's sort of it for the Comet work. We're, again, batch remains part of our scope, workflow, visibility, Lark integration. That's a lot of stuff for 2 sprints. It should be fun. I think that's everything we have for you today.
Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up?
I'm going to stop recording and maybe a question will come through.